Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, wherever you're listening from. I'm Janice Kaminer-Resnick, and I warmly welcome you on behalf of the leadership team here at America at a Crossroads. Along with me are former Congressman Mel Levine and former Los Angeles County Supervisor Zev Yaroslavsky. Thank you all for your flexibility as we adjust our programming to respond to breaking news. With the sudden outbreak of war between Israel and Iran just 5 days ago, we felt it essential to bring in an expert analyst to help us understand this critical moment. We have so many questions. What are the implications for Iran's nuclear capabilities? Has Israel succeeded in disrupting them? There seems to be little regional condemnation of Israel's preemptive strike. Does that suggest tacit support of Israel's initiative? And so many more questions. This unfolding crisis really demands our attention, and we are just so grateful tonight to have David Aaron Miller here, who's adjusted his schedule to accommodate our programming. We're equally grateful to Mary Ziegler, who graciously agreed to postpone her important program on reproductive rights, which is now rescheduled for September 3rd. And finally, many thanks to Patt Morrison for moderating tonight's program. We're trying to arrange for an extra session this coming Monday with Ambassador Dennis Ross, who just left Israel today. Please stay tuned and watch your emails, and we will bring you updated information as to whether or not we are able to secure that program for Monday between 5 and 6 p.m. Pacific. That would be in addition to next Wednesday's program, when we will welcome a new face to America at a Crossroads, Mark Dunkelman. Mark is a public policy fellow at Brown University and an author. He will be in conversation with Larry Mantle on an overarching topic, the USA, why nothing is working, and how we might be able to fix it. And the following week, on July 2nd, we will be welcoming Mayor Karen Bass, the mayor of Los Angeles, who will be in conversation with Madeline Brand on the topic, Federal Troops in LA, What Comes Next? Of course, this is a topic relevant to all the cities across the country, which are now or soon might find themselves in the same situation as LA at the current time. So we're sure you're going to want to tune in for that program. And a reminder, you can watch after the fact via podcast or via YouTube. All the info and links are in our emails. Finally, we truly appreciate your donation. It is through your support, both via your attendance and your donations, that we can continue our programming. Now, without further ado, please welcome tonight's moderator, a highly decorated veteran broadcast journalist and writer with scores of Golden Globes, Emmys, and parts of Pulitzers as well. She's with the LA Times now, but has been in almost every medium that you can imagine. A great person, a great thinker, and a great journalist. Please welcome Patt Morrison. Patt?
Janice, thank you, and thank you to the whole leadership team, to all of you who support and watch these programs as we continue to bring you vital analysis in critical moments at a very critical point in the nation and the world's history. Aaron David Miller, you've seen here before. He's an American Mideast analyst and author and negotiator, a senior fellow with the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. He spent 24 years under Republican and Democratic presidents in the State Department on Mideast matters, where he brokered many agreements. You also see and hear him as a commentator on CNN and NPR. Welcome back. Happy to have you.
Pat, thanks for having me, and shout out to Janice, Mel, and Zev for doing these programs. I mean, no better title, America at a Crossroads, reflects our current times and circumstances. It's an honor for me to be here. Greatly appreciated.
The news is changing minute by minute, but I want to ask you whether we are at a moment of stasis in terms of, has Israel gone as far as it can go without a decision from the United States, from Donald Trump, about whether or not the United States will help Israel in employing bunker buster bombs that would attack the one thing that can get to the Fordo fuel enrichment plant in Iran, probably the best defended place in the entire country?
Look, I think the Israelis will continue their campaign regardless of whether the president of the United States decides to enter or not. And it's extraordinary what they've managed to accomplish over the course of the last 18 months, at some cost, of course. They have escalation dominance. It's a fancy term to describe the following, but it's worth a note in a minute. Escalation dominance is the ability of a power to control the pace, the focus, the intensity of their military conflict with their adversaries. In this case, Hamas, Hezbollah, and Iran. Israel has the capacity to escalate. in ways that none of these adversaries have. And it's demonstrated that escalation dominance in September of last year with Hezbollah, which I think was a triggering episode, which suggested to the current Israeli prime minister that maybe now there was an opportunity to carry out a similar campaign. And they're very similar campaigns in terms of the phases with respect to Hezbollah and what the Israelis are doing for Iran. So in the next 48, 72, 96 hours, if the administration decides, president decides not to strike comprehensively or selectively, more surgically, I think the Israelis will continue to do what they're doing because, as one retired Israeli general said, and I don't want to trivialize this, people are dying on both sides, innocent people. He said, we're playing soccer with the Iranians. The difference is they don't have a goalie. And the truth is that mental image should conjure up, it does for me, just how much supremacy the Israelis have been able to master and maintain over the skies of Tehran.
When this began on June 12th, 13th, Israel time, US time, did Netanyahu get out in front of Donald Trump in this? Was this to any extent a surprise, not in terms of what might be happening, but when it happened?
You know, some adventurous journalists, the New York Times did a pretty good TikTok on this, but some days, and there'll be no state commission of inquiry, I'm afraid. So there's never really going to be the transparency with respect to Israeli military campaigns, certainly not in Gaza. I think that the reality was that one of Netanyahu's calculations was, despite the rather tense relationship with Donald Trump, and let's be clear, they don't like each other. You could argue that one con man, and having worked for Democrats and Republicans and having voted for Democrats and Republicans, you could argue that one con man has an intuitive understanding of the ability of the other to con. And I think what went into Netanyahu's calculation was an effort to take advantage of a set of circumstances: Israel's escalation dominance, Iran's weakness, and the advances Iran had made in the nuclear program. But the key piece to this, the one without which I don't think the Israelis would have been as risk ready as they were, was the way that the prime minister made the case to Donald Trump, who did not greenlight this operation, but clearly didn't say no, and in fact became part of the deception and the Israeli ruse, because as late as Thursday afternoon, well before the Israelis struck Friday morning, their time, Trump was talking about sending Stephen Witkoff to Oman for another session of the negotiations. They literally put the Iranians to sleep, and that was critically important for the first phase of their campaign, which was decapitation. So the Iranian leadership believed, wrongly, that there would be no Israeli strike until after that sixth and never consummated round of negotiations in Oman. They were wrong. So Trump acquiesced. He may have had his doubts, but as soon as the campaign demonstrated success, as soon as it demonstrated a terrifying power of escalation dominance, he started riding the tiger.
You mentioned the prospect of more talks in Oman, at which point a plan was already in motion, if not actually in effect. What were the diplomatic off-ramp possibilities, and were they existing even up to that point?
Look, they had 5 rounds of negotiations. There was a time limit. Donald Trump set it, right? June 11, 2 months to negotiate a deal that took the Biden administration beginning in 2015, or sorry, beginning earlier, but consummated in 2015, 2 years to negotiate. My read from the beginning—
That would be the Obama administration.
I'm sorry, the Obama administration, with the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, the Iran nuclear agreement. I mean, I've been around negotiations for the better part of my professional life. They require several things to succeed. They require 2 parties that are serious and willing. They require urgency, not just pain, but the prospects of gain, so that each side could walk away having won something. And they require some achievable, attainable goal. There was absolutely no way that these negotiations, the headlines were going in the wrong direction. And had the Israelis not struck, I suspect, even if they extended the time frame for diplomatic negotiations, they would not have succeeded. The gaps between Iran and the U.S. on critical issues were as wide as the Grand Canyon. So I think that was another consideration that the prime minister folded into his pitch to the president.
From Iran's point of view, was the thinking that we've fulfilled all of our obligations and Donald Trump just swept the pieces off the chessboard, and now where does that leave us?
Well, in 2018, Donald Trump extricated the United States from an agreement which was flawed, but I would argue still functional. It constrained, it restrained, it bought time. The monitoring and inspection provisions about the sites that we knew about, the IAEA knew about, and the Israelis knew about. They're undeclared sites, which more on this later in the conversation, which are highly problematic. It was flawed but functional. And Trump, for reasons, he self-styled the world's greatest negotiator. This was an Obama deal. He knows, he believes Iran is a bad actor, true enough. And he rarely has there been a president more determined to overturn everything with respect to the man who preceded him. And you saw that with a terrifying clarity. You've seen it over the last 5 or 6 months. So I think from the Iranian perspective, yeah, he unilaterally walked out of the accord, but let's be clear, the Iranians are not good actors here. The IAEA earlier this week, with 35 countries, 19 of whom voted to hold Iran in censure because they've been violating their NPT and additional protocol requirements. They're enriching uranium at a level that exceeds, and remember, just because the US pulled out of the agreement still exists with the Brits, the French, the Germans, the Russians. And I think the Iranian calculation was to look at Trump as their version of the big actor, of the great Satan. I think they were concerned, however, which is why they agreed to send the Iranian foreign minister, the key negotiator, to meet directly with Stephen Witkoff. A lot of this was brokered by the Omanis, but the Iranians broke a taboo of their own, which was to actually begin direct negotiations with Stephen Witkoff, largely because I think they believed, rightly, that forget Marco Rubio, forget Mike Waltz, forget Pete Hegseth. Stephen Witkoff is the envoy for everything. He's the only person in this administration, I think, that enjoys the real trust and confidence, if you can use those words with respect to Donald Trump's relationships, largely because Witkoff succeeded in the one area of the human enterprise that Donald Trump respects more than any other, the accumulation of capital.
We are getting some terrific questions in the Q&A box. We hope you will put your questions there, and we'll get to as many as we can a little later in the program as we talk with Aaron David Miller. Earlier this week, and things are happening so fast, it's hard to get a time frame. Donald Trump repudiated Tulsi Gabbard, who had talked about the fact that the Iran nuclear program wasn't anywhere near enriching material for a nuclear bomb. And Donald Trump almost literally said, don't pay any attention to her, don't listen to her. Where was the intelligence coming from? Was this Israeli intelligence? Was it American intelligence that Trump chose to ignore?
Yes, the long and short of it. Not to put a personal point on this, but my friend of 40 years, Bill Burns, was Joe Biden's CIA director. And Burns brought not just intelligence, but credibility and integrity and the non-politicalization of intelligence. I started my career as an intelligence analyst. Wise policy has to be based on the world the way it is, not the way you want it to be. And I think, Tulsi Gabbard's assessment, I think, and she's the director of national intelligence, which means she coordinates the 16 units of the U.S. intelligence community. Her intelligence assessment, I haven't seen it, but the reports indicated that Iran was not on the cusp of developing a weapon. Yes, the Iranians have enough fissile material to make 10 nuclear weapons, but it's still a hop, skip, and a jump of some difficulty to miniaturize the warhead, to develop a physics package, to work on triggering and implosion devices, and then create a delivery system. So I think the conventional wisdom of CIA was that Iran I think last year they said Iran may have been a year and a half or 2 years away from producing a weapon. I think that's probably not the case. I think the shorter time span is probably a better assessment. If there were no, if Iran was left to its own devices without any Israeli air activity or distractions, I suspect that they could assemble some sort of device, maybe not a warhead on a missile, but some sort of device within 6 to 8 months.
Like a dirty bomb, you mean?
Yeah, radiological bomb. Yeah, exactly. I mean, remember, you have to test a weapon, and testing a nuclear weapon without, I mean, without, I mean, safeguarding your transparency is very, very difficult to do. So it would have required some effort. But there's no doubt about it. Let's be clear that Iran's calculation was to remain what I call a screwdriver's turn away, one screwdriver's turn away from developing a weapon, whether that's 3, 6, or 8 months, right? They are now, however, a nuclear threshold state. They have all of the elements, all of the knowledge, and it may well be after the events of this week and what's going to follow, they may now have a degree of urgency that they lacked before. And I think that's one of the considerations that has to be baked into this very bad cake about what's the day after here, even if Donald Trump and the massive ordnance penetrators, those 30,000-pound, 20-foot-long school bus sizes bombs are dropped from B-2s on Fordo, even if they destroy Fordo. Do we actually think that the Iranians haven't tried to move enough centrifuges to sites that we don't know about? That they've taken their stockpile of 300 kilograms of enriched uranium at 60%, and all they got to do now is get to 90% somewhere else? That's a real problem, and I'm just hoping that people are thinking about the day after.
Well, is there then a possibility of a doubling down by the Iranians saying, what the hell, we're going to go for broke? If this is how they're going to treat us, we're going to, insofar as they're capable with the decapitation of military and science in these latest attacks, can they go for broke and say, we're going to build this damn bomb?
I think the damage the Israelis have done and the damage that the United States could do, assuming that the president decides to enter this conflict, is going to be highly constraining. The scientists they killed, you cannot replace. The knowledge of a scientific community, the archives, the research facilities the Israelis have bombed and vaporized, all of that is going to have to be reconstituted. And it will take time. There's no question about how much time is unclear. But let me just make one elemental point. There are no good deals on the nuclear side with Iran. We would always be worried about breakout, about undisclosed sites, about illicit weaponization activities that the Iranians were conducting. The only way to ensure that Iran never gets a nuclear weapon, the only way, is to deny the regime or to change the character of the regime so to make it less acquisitive. Produce a regime that wasn't interested in a nuclear weapon. And that, the notion of regime change, which people throw around with far too much casualness, is, in my opinion right now, extremely difficult to do or even to aspire to right now. If you look at how regimes have changed in recent years in the Middle East, 3 ways. Egypt and Tunisia. Millions of Tunisians and Egyptians out in the streets. The government refuses to fire on their own citizens, or at least continue to fire. And Ben Ali of Tunisia and Mubarak leave office. Then there's the HTS Syria model, a very adept former affiliate, derivative of Al-Qaeda, Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, HTS, under the current president of Syria, Ahmed Shara, with the support of the Turks, takes advantage of what they believe is a hollowed out regime, and they dash toward Damascus. And within 10 days, the Assads are gone. And then finally, the George W. Bush, Iraq and Afghanistan. The United States invades a country, um, deposes its leader. Um, I don't think any of those models are appropriate to the circumstances that we face today with Iran. Would I like to see a different regime? Yes. It's a bad regime. It prosecutes, tortures, willfully tortures, imprisons its own citizens. I mean, but even if you take Humpty Dumpty off the wall and it cracks into a million pieces and you get dysfunction and regime destabilization, how do you pick up the pieces? Who ascends to power in Iran? And that problem, that's another one of these day after problems that powers need to understand before they act.
A couple of questions about perception in the rest of the world and Israel itself. Christiane Amanpour, the CNN diplomatic correspondent, said Netanyahu has wanted to do this for decades. He's never believed in the diplomatic path, but no American president has allowed him to do it until Trump. And there was also a German journalist who reported that off mic, off the record, German Chancellor Friedrich Merz said that Israel is doing the dirty work for all of us. Can you tease out those two comments?
Well, Christiane's comment is obviously correct. I mean, Benjamin Netanyahu had two major objectives other than maintaining himself in power, or at least getting to power and maintaining himself in power. One, to prevent the establishment of a Palestinian state and anything that even remotely resembles the division of Jerusalem. That was number one. But even more important was freeing the Israeli people, the Israeli public, the state of Israel from the shadow of an Iranian bomb. No other Israeli prime minister has been more determined or dedicated to do that. And the means to do it, as far as the prime minister is concerned, not sanctions, not negotiations. The only way to do it was through military action and regime removal. This shouldn't surprise you, however. And I played this thought experiment with myself after October 7. If you put the following three Israeli prime ministers in power on October 7, David Ben-Gurion, Ehud Barak, and Yitzhak Rabin, I'm persuaded that the response to October 7 would have been more or less the same. But 6, 8 months in, these three Israeli prime ministers would have begun to understand that military power, escalation dominance, is a means to an end. It's an instrument to achieve realistic and attainable political goals. Benjamin Netanyahu is probably the most skilled, determined politician on the Israeli scene today. He faces no real opposition, some within his own coalition. But he is not ready or willing to use, it's easy for me to say, right? I live in Chevy Chase, Maryland, and I'm aware of the fact I had two Israeli prime ministers, Rabin and Netanyahu, say the same thing to me, which was, don't trivialize our security needs and requirements. You live in Chevy Chase, Maryland, exactly their words. We're living on top of a volcano. But Benjamin Netanyahu cannot, because of his political circumstances, on trial for bribery, fraud, and breach of trust in the Jerusalem District Court 5 years running now. He cannot lose power, which means he must keep together, cobble together, maintain the most right-wing government in the history of the state of Israel. Anything that remotely resembles turning escalation dominance into political agreements, particularly with the Palestinians, or any notion that somehow you're going to give to the Americans the lead role in negotiation to work out some deal like the JCPOA, which denies the Israelis an opportunity to deal in the way they want to deal with the Iranian nuclear issue, that's to be avoided. So he had, unlike the three prime ministers I mentioned, he had no stake really in fashioning a day after scenario. He wanted total victory in Gaza, and he has now said, and the president has said as well, they want total victory in Iran.
I'll get back to the German chancellor's supposed comment in a minute, but what does this do in terms of what's going on in Gaza? We saw the crippling of Hezbollah was probably a predicate to this in a big way, But is this not like the two-front war that's always been warned about in Israel and for Israel?
Yeah, I mean they're now arguably they have at least 4 or 5 fronts. They have Lebanon and Hezbollah hollowed out, but still an actor. They have Palestinian Hamas and Jihad, organized and unorganized groups on the West Bank. They have Gaza. They've got Syria. They don't trust Ahmed Shara. They're worried. In fact, they were deploying forces from Gaza to the Eastern Front because they're very concerned about a Shia effort to replicate October 7. Um, and they now have the Houthis. Distance is an advantage to them, but also an advantage to the Houthis. And they have Iran. So it's 5, 6, 7 fronts. Mercer's comment, by the way, reflects the reason why Netanyahu feels much more comfortable in the Iran space than he does in the Palestinian space. There's absolutely no pressure from Europe. The 3 countries that the Israelis care about, the Brits, the French, and the Germans, Macron has said some negative things about Netanyahu, but by and large, those 3 countries have done nothing in response to the Israeli strikes.
So the German chancellor comment, if in fact it is true, is correct,
Yes,
that Israel is
exactly.
doing the dirty work for
Right.
all of us.
And the Germans among the 3 are the most forgiving for obvious reasons, and the most flexible when it comes to a greater understanding of Israeli security needs.
The reactions, of course, range far and wide, but in general, that agenda of doing the dirty work for us has been important in how the world has, at least the official world, has assessed this. Where does Iran find itself? It's a Muslim country, but it's not an Arab country. It's a Persian country, and its cultural connections with the rest of the countries, with the Arab countries in the Middle East, it is shifting, always changing, a little tenuous. Where does that recalibrate its relations in the rest of the Middle East?
I think Iran is now more isolated than any point in the history of the Islamic Republic since 1979. Its 2 great power allies, the Chinese and the Russians, for any number of reasons, are not going. I mean, they will exploit Israeli missteps and try to appeal to the globalized world anytime the president makes a statement like urging the entire capital of Tehran to evacuate. But the Russians are not going to throw good money after bad. They did not intercede in December, January last year, to save the Assads. The Chinese have no capacity to do that. Chinese are worried, of course, about escalation, not so much in terms of the nuclear issue, but in terms of Iranian oil is critically important to them, and so is Saudi oil. And if, in fact, the president authorizes a strike, a significant strike, Iran will respond, whether it will respond by trying to mine the Straits of Hormuz or drive up global shipping as a consequence of stopping tankers. Closing the Straits of Hormuz is a very tough proposition. And then the U.S. would have to open it. So I think the Iranians cannot depend on North Korea, maybe. No, they are exceedingly vulnerable, exceedingly weak, and exceedingly isolated. There's no constituency for Iran anywhere among nations that actually count.
Do you see any implications for Israel and for Trump's policies in the fact that this is really splitting MAGA? That one of the campaign pledges that Donald Trump brought in both of his, well, all 3 of his campaigns was ending war. We have too many wars going on. We don't need all of these wars. And now here he is considering sending American bombers in against Iran on behalf of Israel.
I mean, the MAGA debate may well have slowed down the timetable. But it's really hard for me to read. I mean, we've never had a president who, or as dysfunctional a 2-party political system than we have right now. Donald Trump owns the Republican Party. The MAGA, I don't want to trivialize the MAGA voices here. He pays attention to them. Even while he criticizes Tucker Carlson, he compliments him as well. But Donald Trump sits astride American politics. I mean, having voted for Republicans and Democrats and worked for Republicans and Democrats, it's a hard thing for me to concede. But I'd have to concede it. Peter Baker's piece in the New York Times the day before yesterday, 10 years after that 30-second walk down the escalator. I mean, this man sits astride a dysfunctional American political system in a way no other president has ever done. And this gives him extraordinary margin and room to maneuver domestically. You know, I think to myself, he could have said no to Benjamin Netanyahu. He has done things to Israel in the last 6 weeks that no American president, Republican or Democrat, that I ever worked for would dare have done. He authorized his hostage negotiator to open up a direct dialogue with Hamas, a group that has willfully killed and murdered Americans and civilians. 3 meetings. He cut his deal with the Houthis, basically saying, you leave our naval vessels alone and our commercially flagged and owned shipping. Said nothing about the Houthis sending drones and ballistic missiles. He announced in the company of the prime minister direct negotiations with Iran, and over the objections of Benjamin Netanyahu, he removed sanctions on Syria. He has now blown through 2 of the 3 governing principles of the U.S.-Israeli relationship. 1, close coordination. He'll do it, but when it suits his interests, he won't. And number 2, he seems completely impervious to me to any domestic reaction. Had a Democratic president done any of the things I just described to you, they would be calling for his impeachment, which means essentially that if Donald Trump wanted to use leverage on Israel on any number of issues, he could.
What is the tripwire for Trump committing the United States even more deeply militarily? Is it attacks on, as you say, blocking the Strait of Hormuz? Is it attacks on American institutions in the Mideast or elsewhere in the world?
No, I mean, I can't predict the future. I'm not the Oracle of Delphi, but there are three possibilities here, I think, and only 3. Number 1, he strikes. Number 2, he doesn't strike and takes advantage of whatever opportunities they are for the famed diplomatic off-ramp, and he's used this trope before, he'll just let them keep on fighting. No, he doesn't need a tripwire. The war plans are already set, I suspect. What's holding him back is unclear to me. I think there's more than a reasonable chance that Trump will commit American air assets to deal with Fordo and perhaps other nuclear sites. Whether he wants to do more than that to amplify what the Israelis have done, ballistic missile production, going after regime leadership targets, all of that is unclear to me. But if he doesn't strike, he essentially makes it possible. And this is my analysis now. I'm not into advocating one course of action or another. If he doesn't strike, the Israelis are incapable, despite the damage they have done, of fundamentally eroding or destroying Iran's nuclear program. They cannot do it. It's redundant, it's decentralized. So if Donald Trump doesn't do it, then Iran emerges, having stood tough in the face of Israeli military action, with its nuclear program more or less intact. That's a risk.
So you, in a sense, have a duplicate of what's going on as far as Hamas. They will only be successful if Hamas is completely destroyed and rooted out. And the Israeli action against Iran is only completely successful if the entire nuclear program is dismantled?
I mean, I think that's Netanyahu's view, but they can't do it. And I think in undertaking this operation, Netanyahu must have had the sense that he might be able to persuade Donald Trump to do it. I just don't see any other way out of this box for Trump other than to strike. If he doesn't strike, he is going to be seen to be not just weak, but utterly feckless. And the Iranians will essentially claim victory. Despite everything they've lost, the nuclear program will remain intact. Fordo will continue to be the source of their advanced centrifuges and will continue to spin out enough spin out fissile material that will be used if the Iranians make a decision to weaponize to produce nuclear weapons. So he's in a box, and to some degree, he put himself there. And that's just the way it is. So we'll see. 48 hours, 3 days.
Mhm. Well, so everyone will just declare victory and retreat to their own sides?
I mean, how would this end? Well, if the Americans strike Iran and destroy Fordo, or try to destroy it, and do a lot of other damage, the supreme leader at 86 faces an existential choice. What is he going to do? Is he going to do nothing? Is he going to navigate a token response? Or will he try, given the fact that he has to try in order to preserve his credibility and the revolution and the regime, to basically up the ante? They have thousands of short-range ballistic missiles they could use against American forces in Iraq, in the Gulf. They could attack Saudi installations. They already did that in September 2019. They could mine the Straits of Hormuz. They could start stopping tankers. And then you'll get an American response to that. So again, I don't think this is a one-off. What would happen if Trump destroyed Fordo and then went to Netanyahu and say, look, you've done a great job. We finished it. Okay? We took out the major source of Iran's nuclear program. Now you got to stop. And then he goes to Iran, and this is the key unknown here. Would the Iranians, under those circumstances, having watched Fordo be destroyed and having weathered these Israeli strikes and having senior members of their general staff, the IRGC Corps, head of the IRGC, they just killed the replacement to the general staff yesterday or the day before. I mean, can the supreme leader, who is making the decisions, can he then agree to enter into negotiations with the Americans? And negotiations over what?
Let's get to some of the questions that people have posed. They're very good questions. Thank you all for putting them in the Q&A box here. Jonathan wants to know, even if Israel and perhaps the United States succeed in taking out Iran's nuclear weapons, what's to stop Russia or North Korea from providing them those weapons the next day? You've addressed a little bit of that they don't feel they want to extend the risk to themselves by doing that. But are there other means that Russia might?
I can't imagine the Russians would transfer nuclear weapons to Iran. North Koreans would certainly, as they advise the Syrians, be able to provide technical advice. But I don't see one power there are reports that the Pakistanis would essentially sell a weapon to the Saudis. I mean, it's feasible, but I can't see the North Koreans or the Russians involved in any transfer of nuclear weapons or even nuclear weapons technology. I can't speak for the North Koreans, but I think the Russians might actually welcome an American strike. It's going to raise the price of oil substantially. It'll distract the United States. Not that Trump needs any more distractions from Ukraine, but I could see Putin playing that advantage. But again, what Putin doesn't want is regime change.
Terry wants to know whether you think that Israel is trying to drag the U.S. into it by publicly stating that they cannot achieve that ultimate goal without the help of the U.S. Terry says, it seems that so public a statement is a violation of sound international politics and diplomacy to cow or browbeat Trump into ordering U.S. involvement. I don't know who can cow or browbeat Trump into anything.
This is the tail wagging the dog. I mean, Donald Trump in Trump 1.0 grew to dislike Benjamin Netanyahu immensely. He thought he was being played with respect to Iran. He was furious that the prime minister prepared a video message when Joe Biden was elected. Furious. That's when he made the famous F-U-C-K him comment. So if Donald Trump is being played by Benjamin Netanyahu, he has only one person to blame, and it's not Benjamin Netanyahu. I mean, I refuse to play into this notion that a crafty, devious Israeli prime minister has once again snookered an American president. I mean, it infantilizes the presidency. It makes Donald Trump look like a fool. And as I mentioned before, these two men don't like one another. They don't trust one another. And they, in many respects, the prime minister is, in some respects, in regard to his self-absorption and narcissism, is a sort of Donald Trump mini-me. So I mean, again, if Donald Trump is in a box, he put himself there, or he didn't do what he might have done to break out of that box.
Robert asks a question about constitutional processes, pointing out that the power to declare war is Congress's. All of this can be done without any declaration of war, I assume. On
Yeah,
Trump's
yeah, I would say that's true. It's true because the presidency is the Energizer Bunny of the American political system. Supreme Court goes in and out of session. Congress goes in and out of session. The White House never goes in and out of session. He's got that on his side. He has a divided and weak Congress on his side. I think I'm trying to remember, it's an interesting historical fact. The last time Congress went to, or the president went to Congress for a declaration of war, I think it was during the 40s when Congress actually, I mean, after declaration of war for Pearl Harbor. So no, there's not going to be, it's not a constitutional issue. It may be in theory, but it's really irrelevant to the current situation. Donald Trump will
Korea was
act. Whether he'll consult with Congress is an interesting question.
the Korean War was in fact a police action.
Yes, it
Avoided
was.
that,
I think it
that
was.
political.
I think we declared war. I have to check this. War on Romania, maybe 1943, and I think that was the last time we actually declared. Congress asked for a declaration of war.
Or I don't know what 9/11 accomplished on that.
Well, there was that was. I mean, they didn't need one. I mean, Congress was there supporting the Bush administration.
We've got a question from Joyce whether the Israeli public is behind the attack on Iran.
Interesting question. I mean, I've talked to a few Israelis over the course of the last week, asked them about the costs and consequences. You've had 400 ballistic missiles launched at Israel since Thursday, Friday last week. 35 of them have gotten through. Significant number of those have fallen in empty spaces. The ones that have caused damage, 600 Israelis have been wounded. Last count, I think 24 Israelis have been killed. Unlike Gaza, this has not divided the Israeli public. Unlike Gaza, there are no hostages. Unlike Gaza, there are no political decisions that need to be made. And still reeling with the trauma of October 7, I think that the consensus in Israel is that, yes, Iran is not only a bad actor, it represents an existential threat to the state of Israel. And again, in the wake of October 7, the degree of pride that the Israelis have evinced, not for operations in Gaza, but against Hezbollah and Iran, I think played Netanyahu's strengths. So the Israeli public is behind him.
And what is the corollary response, so far as we can know, within Iran? Because while there's so much dissension and a longing for regime change, especially with this 86-year-old Ayatollah in charge, whenever a country's under attack, the natural instinct is to unify against the attacker.
You're right, Pat. And I think that has to be stacked up against the anxiety and the fear of what the Iranian public has been witnessing. A significant number of casualties, large numbers of civilians, a lot of destruction, gas lines, I don't know, internet blackouts, electricity blackouts. I don't know whether they've gone to any sort of food shortages or rationing, but no evidence yet of the kind of discontent, people voting with their feet, essentially, going out in the streets. I think your instinct on the country is bombed, um, and you have an Israeli prime minister who's broadcasting that you should rise up against your evil leaders.
And
I
a
don't think
United
that
States president saying you should evacuate Tehran.
there you go. I mean, it doesn't play well, I think, in the hearts and minds category.
A question from Stephen about what's happened with the hostages. It seems like the Hamas question that what's going on in Gaza has taken a back burner to the moment.
Yeah, I don't think there's any doubt. 55 hostages, 20 plus are alive. The rest are not. Hamas's demands, I think, are the same. We'll return all of them, dead and alive. We need ironclad guarantees that you will withdraw your forces from Gaza and you will end the war. I don't, the impasse that has existed since the first ceasefire was signed on January 18th still exists. Netanyahu's endgame in Gaza and Hamas's, and Hamas is now on its third leader, a Northern Brigade commander by the name of Izzadin Haddad. The Sinwar brothers have been killed. Most of the veteran Hamas leaders have been killed, but their end games are mutually exclusive. And for Netanyahu, for Hamas, it's an existential matter. For Netanyahu, it is a politically existential matter. He cannot afford to have the coalition fracture, and it would fracture if he agrees to end the war. He agrees to an asymmetrical number of Palestinian prisoners if all the hostages were returned. The Israeli right is still dreaming of resettlement. And by the way, the IDF, I mean, Israel has developed a new form of concept of border security. That's been apparent. It's not just a question of preventing or preempting in the shadow of October 7th. It's actually deploying Israeli forces. In Gaza, they're there for an indefinite stay. In Lebanon, they have not yet abandoned the 5 strategic positions that they were obligated to do. In Syria, they've declared basically a no-go zone for large areas southwest of Damascus. In the West Bank, the IDF has upped its presence. So this is October 7th. This is a response to the willful and indiscriminate murder, the sexual predation, the mutilation, the taking of hostages, the murdering of hostages, while at the same time the Israeli public believes, rightly, I think, consider an editorial comment, that redeeming the living is more important than avenging the dead. And that is a terrible choice. I'm reminded, I hadn't thought about hostages in a while, so thank you for bringing that up. It's a painful reminder on the Israeli side for the families and the hostages, and on the Palestinian side for the unbelievable toll that Israel's prosecution of the war, an enemy, fair enough, embeds itself beneath, below, under civilian populations, wanting an exponential number of Palestinian deaths in order to blacken Israel's name. But the suffering that the Israelis have inflicted, Hamas, I've heard all the arguments. They started it. It's on them. Hamas is a brutal terrorist organization. Nonetheless, the prosecution of this war raises a lot of very important questions. And for the Israeli public, the only way they're going to get answered, why October 7th happened, why was it an intelligence failure as well as an operational failure? How come it took a day or two for the IDF to respond? You need a state commission of inquiry for that. And current alignment in Israeli politics is not going to provide the space for that.
We have a programming note I want to update the audience for that we won't know until later this evening if we can confirm an extra program for next week. Likely we will have a briefing with former Ambassador Dennis Ross on Monday at 5 p.m. Pacific. We'll send out an email the minute the program's confirmed so everyone can be updated and put that in your calendars. So there's a question from William, which is unsettling and startling. I hadn't thought of it. Would Israel consider using a nuclear weapon on Fordo?
No, I mean, it's not feasible. It's not practical. The political implications, the radiation leaks, the radioactivity, no.
Let me expand on a question being posed by Lori about Trump and the presence of the massive No Kings demonstrations and his attitude toward the reaction of the American public toward anything he does when it comes to Iran and Israel. Does he care? Does he think that this split in the MAGA movement will matter to him? Does the domestic audience reaction concern him at all?
Well, the reaction of his base concerns him, but we have a while until midterms. As I mentioned, Donald Trump exhibited a degree of toughness with respect to Israel and imperviousness to the political reaction of being tough with Israel. No American president that I worked for, from Jimmy Carter to Bush 43, would ever have done these things, Democrat or Republican. And I worked for Bush 41 and James Baker, and that was a difficult time, to be sure. Does Donald Trump care? I mean, you're watching the most acute and grave aggrandizement of presidential power in the history of the republic. You're watching an individual who has blown through norms and institutions, who has no real respect for the rule of law or court orders and filings. He abides when he must. He's gone to war with the universities, with cultural institutions in Washington. He's hollowed out VOA, U.S. Institute for Peace, USAID, gone to war with law firms. In my view, everything that he does is subordinated, in my judgment, to his political interests, his financial interests, his pet peeves, his projects. And unlike any other president in the history of this republic, and again, I voted for Republicans and Democrats, and I worked for them, although these Republicans are not my Republicans. In the history of the presidency, he's the only president that has a incapacity, literally, to turn the M in me upside down, so it becomes a W in we, to tether his own needs and requirements and his policies to something broader and more meaningful. And that is, we've never been there before. Worst crises. I tried to convince a millennial the other day that 1968 was a worse year than any single year in the Trump administration. And there was no sale. I mean, thousands of Americans are dying in Vietnam. Bobby Kennedy is murdered. Martin Luther King is murdered. Urban riots that go well beyond anything that has occurred. Chicago at the convention. This is not that. This is something quite different and something we've never seen before. And my fear and concern, I was going to make this point anyway before we concluded. I spent my entire life in foreign policy. The real struggle is not abroad. It's not in Israel. It's not in Ukraine. It's here. And what's being broken here will not be repaired quickly or easily. And for people of a certain age, and I would include myself in that category, the way the country used to be, the good things about it, are going to be very difficult to recapture quickly. The unkindness and the cruelty alone is breathtaking. Sorry for that, but
no, I think it's important that we talk about institutionalizing some of these deplorable traits. I want to get one more question in before we do our, as you know, our try to be hopeful, positive wrap up. Ivan wants to know whether the weakening of Iran will also diminish the incentive for any Arab states like Saudi Arabia to join the Abraham Accords.
I mean, I think the Israelis believe it. The Israelis believe when the Iranian file is closed, that Arab states will be under much less pressure. It's a fair point, but what would really enhance and expand the Abraham Accords was if the Israelis found a way over time, not now. October 7th has made that impossible, to find a way to deal with a problem much closer to home. And that is, what are they going to do about the West Bank and Gaza. And I might add, the 2 million Palestinian citizens of Israel, Arabs, Israelis, Israeli Arabs, they define themselves in different ways. What are they going to do about their two Palestinian problems?
So it's still Gaza and Hamas that is front and center in terms of how it governs the reaction of Arab countries in the Middle East. More than this,
You need an end to the war in Gaza, and you need some move by the Israelis with respect to the broader issue of what to do about a final agreement between Israelis and Palestinians. It's not for now. You have Israeli centrist and left of center politicians who do not talk about a two-state solution. It's bad politics. The trauma of October 7 is going to live on for a long time because it's not over yet.
and it will govern Israeli politics and all the ripple effects for all of that time as well.
It will. Israel's a center-right country, and it lacks real leadership. And if I had any, I mean, that's the key here. Leaders who are masters of their political houses, not prisoners of their ideologies. Leaders who are willing to think more about the future security and prosperity of their publics than about themselves. And by the way, it's not just confined to Israel. The Palestinian leadership crisis is just so much more acute. Hamas on one hand, Abbas on the other. It's a choice the Palestinians are never going to get to make or won't get to make anytime soon because there are going to be no elections. It's a very fraught and really challenging pathway forward.
And all the consequences of leaders holding on to power, perhaps beyond their own authority, legitimate authority.
A very good point, Pat.
Well, we like to wrap up with something a bit positive. We do want to remind people that we do not know at this point whether we're going to have an additional program on Monday. We're hoping that Ambassador Dennis Ross will join us, so we want you to watch your email for a notification about that. But Aaron David Miller, you always have something hopeful for us to hold on to, and I hope that tonight is no exception.
You know, in thinking this through, I think about what are our responsibilities. I interviewed Norm Eisen on the show I have at Carnegie, and he quoted his parents. Mother survived Auschwitz. Father fled in 1939 and then joined the U.S. military. So he credits both the U.S. military for saving both of his parents. And he quotes a Hebrew biblical verse, which is, your mission is not to finish the work, but neither is your mission to stand down from that work. And I think that's something that I take very seriously, and I'd impart to all of you. And I quote Kennedy. I've done this before. Jack Kennedy was the first and last president that really had an emotional impact on me. I was 12 when he was murdered. Kennedy described himself as an idealist without illusion. That phrase, idealism without illusion, the fact that you should never give up believing that the world can be a better place, that you can be a better person, that your community, your family, your city, your state, the country, the world can be a better place. Can't give that up. We can't see what's in front of us for good or ill. But as you go through the process of this kind of transformation, it's critically important that you go through it with your eyes wide open. So that's, I mean, I'm an idealist without illusion.
So to be clear-eyed, but also hopeful, which is
Clear-eyed
a difficult balance to maintain.
Clear-eyed and hopeful. And just one unsolicited piece of advice, although you asked, we have more information at our fingertips than in any other point in the history of man and womankind. And yet, I fear, we are lazier and dumber than we've ever been. Part of it is because of what's happened to the media environment here, but you must get outside of your comfort zone. I mean, every day, the world is an unassembled jigsaw puzzle on my living room floor. Every day, I try to put it together. Sometimes the pieces don't fit, sometimes they do. But the ones that don't fit, I try to figure out why they don't fit. I talk to people I might not otherwise talk to. And I would just encourage you to expand expand.
We will all try to do the same, expand our minds, expand our circle of information and sources. Always a pleasure. Hope you will join us again soon as we work our way through the complexities and the perplexities of the world as we find it today. Thank you so much, as always.
Thank you, Pat. Great questions. Thanks again, and take good care.
Thanks to our audience as well. We'll be updating you on a potential program on Monday with Ambassador Dennis Ross to further take us through what's going on with Israel, Iran, and the United States role in all of that. And as you see some upcoming programs, we'd also like you to join us for. I'm Pat Morrison. Thank you for joining us tonight.